June 1992. Porsche was bleeding out on a cold floor in Stuttgart. Sales had plummeted by 70% in just 6 years, and the company was hemorrhaging nearly $300 million annually. Executives sat in a boardroom that felt more like a wake, staring at a balance sheet that resembled a crime scene. They were the world's most prestigious sports car manufacturer, but they were dying because they were too slow, too expensive, and too arrogant to change. To the outside world, Porsche was a symbol of German excellence, but inside the factory, it was a chaotic mess of hand-fitted parts and obsolete management. They were weeks away from being swallowed by a giant like Toyota or Mercedes-Benz, destined to become a mere trim level on a commuter sedan. 3 decades later, that near corpse has mutated into the most profitable automotive brand on the planet. While the titans of the industry like Volkswagen and Toyota scramble to sell 10 million cars a year for razor-thin margins, Porsche has mastered a different, more lethal game. They don't need to sell a car to everyone, they only need to sell one to the right person at a price that would make a diamond merchant blush. They have turned engineering into a cult and scarcity into a tactical weapon, consistently posting profit margins that dwarf the entire luxury sector. But the shiny crest and the scream of the flat-six engine mask a cold, calculating machine. Porsche didn't just build better cars, they engineered a psychological trap. They took the soul of a racing legend and grafted it onto the bodies of suburban SUVs, diluted their heritage for the masses, and perfected the art of charging 5 figures for options that should be standard on a budget hatchback. It is a business model built on the insecurities of the wealthy and the ruthless optimization of desire. This is the story of how Porsche won the world by refusing to join it.
To understand how Porsche wins without volume, you have to look at the blood-soaked transition of the early 1990s. When Wendell and Weideking took the helm in 1993, he didn't look at the cars, he looked at the waste. The factory was a museum of inefficiency. Engineers would spend hours hand-filing parts that didn't fit because the tolerances were a suggestion rather than a rule. Weideking did the unthinkable. He invited the Japanese. He brought in consultants from Toyota to humiliate the German masters, forcing veteran engineers to reorganize their pristine stations and adopt the lean manufacturing principles that had made the Camry a global hegemon. The Germans hated it. They felt their craftsmanship was being replaced by a soulless assembly line. But Weideking knew that if they didn't learn how to build cars efficiently, they wouldn't be building cars at all. This was the first pillar of the Porsche win, the marriage of boutique prestige with industrial-grade efficiency. They learned to build a luxury product with the cost discipline of a discount supermarket. By the time the Boxster launched in 1996, Porsche wasn't just a car company, it was a profit engine. However, the real pivot, the one that still makes purists spit on the floor, came in 2002. This was the year of the Cayenne. For decades, the Porsche name was synonymous with the 911, a heavy, rear-engined scalpel that required a master's touch to drive. When Porsche announced they were building a heavy, lumbering SUV, the automotive world screamed treason. They called it the end of the brand. They claimed Porsche had sold its soul for a seat at the soccer mum table. They were right, and it was the smartest move in corporate history. The Cayenne wasn't just a car, it was a cash cow designed to graze on the unlimited green of the global elite.
Porsche realised that while there are only so many people who want to cram themselves into a cramped 2-seater, there are millions who want the status of the Porsche crest while sitting comfortably in a leather-wrapped tank. The Cayenne, and later the Macan, provided the volume that Porsche needed to survive, but it did so without the brand-eroding discounts that plagued companies like Ford or GM. They sold SUVs at sports car prices, using the high-volume profits of the Macan to fund the low-volume development of the 911. The SUVs became the lungs that allowed the sports cars to breathe. But the volume of the SUV line is only half the story. The real genius of the Porsche model lies in the Porsche tax. Go to any other car manufacturer's website and you can choose a few trim levels. Go to Porsche's configurator and you enter a psychological labyrinth. They have mastered the art of the upsell to a degree that borders on the predatory. Want a leather-wrapped steering wheel? That'll be an extra $1,000. Want the seat belts to match the colour of your interior? $500. Want a special paint colour that was standard in the 1970s? That's a paint-to-sample option that can cost $20,000 or more. Porsche has realised that for their clientele, the price is not a barrier, it is a scoreboard. By offering an almost infinite list of customizations, they ensure that no two Porsches are exactly alike, and they ensure that the average transaction price is often 40% higher than the base MSRP. They're selling the illusion of bespoke craftsmanship through a highly automated, high-margin logistics chain. The result is a financial profile that looks more like a software company than a car manufacturer. While a mass-market brand might make a few $100s of profit on a car, Porsche has been known to pull in over $20,000 per vehicle.
In some years, that figure has spiked even higher. They have weaponized the concept of exclusivity at scale. They sell enough cars to be visible on every street corner in Greenwich or Zurich, but few enough that the brand still feels like an entry club for the winners of capitalism. This financial dominance led to one of the most audacious and dark chapters in corporate history, the 2008 attempted takeover of Volkswagen. It was a story of David trying to swallow Goliath with a mouthful of poisoned derivatives. Led by Wiedeking and the Porsche family, the tiny sports car company began quietly buying up shares and options in Volkswagen, which was many times its size. It was a play fueled by ego and the desire to control the entire German automotive landscape. For a brief moment in October 2008, Porsche's maneuvering caused a short squeeze so violent that Volkswagen briefly became the most valuable company in the world. Hedge funds that had bet against VW were wiped out overnight, losing billions. It was a ruthless display of financial power. But the timing was catastrophic. The global financial crisis hit, credit markets froze, and Porsche's mountain of debt became a noose. In a move of Shakespearean irony, the company they tried to conquer ended up buying them. Porsche AG was folded into the Volkswagen Group. Yet even in defeat, Porsche won. They became the crown jewel of the VW empire, the primary source of its profit and the center of its high-end engineering. They maintained their autonomy and continued to outperform every other brand in the portfolio. They proved that in the modern world, you don't need to be the biggest to be the most powerful. You just need to be the most indispensable. This brings us to the modern era and the rise of the electric vehicle. The Taycan, launched in 2019, was Porsche's answer to Tesla.
But where Tesla focused on tech and disruption, Porsche focused on the one thing Silicon Valley couldn't replicate, the feeling of a machine. They charged more for an EV than almost anyone else on the market, and yet again the world lined up to pay. They proved that the Porsche win isn't tied to an internal combustion engine. It's tied to a brand identity that promises you are better than the person in the lane next to you. However, beneath the record-breaking IPO in 2022 and the glowing reviews, there is a growing cynicism. As Porsche pushes further into the luxury stratosphere, it leaves its traditional fans behind. The cars are becoming heavier, more digital, and increasingly unattainable for the middle-class enthusiasts who built the brand's legend. Porsche is no longer a car company for drivers. It is a wealth management firm that happens to produce high-performance assets. They are leaning into the Veblen good territory, where the higher the price, the more people want the product, regardless of its actual utility. They win without volume because they have escaped the gravity of the commodity market. They don't compete on fuel economy or trunk space or warranty length. They compete on the intangible, chemical reaction that happens when a human being looks at a shield with a horse on it and feels a surge of status-driven adrenaline. They have turned a car into a badge of survival in the late capitalist jungle. The hidden cost of this victory is the sanitisation of the brand. Every year, the cars become more perfect, more refined, and perhaps a little more sterile. By optimising for profit margins and SUV volume, they have created a world where the 911 is a boutique hobby funded by the boredom of the suburban commuter. They have won the business war, but they are constantly at risk of losing the cultural soul that made the victory worth having.
Porsche's strategy is a blueprint for the future of luxury. Sell less, charge more, and make the customer feel lucky to be exploited. They have survived bankruptcy, fought off the Japanese invasion, survived a disastrous takeover attempt, and navigated the death of the manual transmission. They remain the gold standard for how to extract the maximum amount of capital from the global elite while maintaining a veneer of artisanal heritage. In the end, Porsche doesn't need to sell 1 million cars to rule the road. They just need to make sure that the few thousand they do sell are lusted after by the millions who can't afford them. They have mastered the economy of envy. They win because they understand that in a world of abundance, the only thing truly valuable is the thing you can't have. This is the calculated, high-margin reality of the Porsche empire, a machine that turns steel and leather into pure, unadulterated profit, one overpriced option at a time.